At this point, we've deployed ADDS, and everything's running pretty well. We've added domain controllers, we've created OUs, we've added users. We're pretty much chugging right along. But when we start looking at domain controllers or thinking about domain controllers, we have to be thinking about security. So in this lesson, we're going to look at service authentication because we have tons of services out there. We want to make sure those services are secure. And we're also going to look at account policies. So in our first sub-lesson, we're going to look at creating and configuring service accounts. Now, most of our apps and services that run will run with a type of service account. And we have two types of service accounts. We have MSAs and we have group MSAs. An MSA is a managed service account. The GMSAs extend the functionality of the MSAs to multiple servers in your ADDS domain. And these MSAs are stored in the managed services account container in ADDS. And these service accounts are much more secure than the previous ways where we used to use standard user accounts or the default NT authority / system, NT authority / local service, or the NT authority / network service. Those are still viable options. They're just not as secure as using MSAs or GMSAs. Let's expand a little bit on the managed service accounts or MSAs. MSAs provide a couple key functions for us: automatic password management and simplified SPN, service principal name management. So remember, an SPN associates a service with a service logon account, which means the passwords for these standard user accounts have to be periodically changed to help maintain the security of your apps versus the automatic password management that the MSAs had. And if you have a standard user account with your SPNs, there's some additional administrative effort and some possible authentication issues that may result. So MSAs clean that up for you. GMSAs extend the functionality of MSAs to multiple servers in your ADDS domain, which is really useful for load balancing. Now, in order for us to use GMSAs, we have three requirements here. Your clients have to be running a minimum of Windows 8. You have to create a KDS or a key distribution service for your domain, and at least one DC must be running Windows Server 2012 or later. They don't all have to be running 2012 or later, but at least one has to be running Windows 2012 or later. To configure your managed service accounts, we're going to be using PowerShell. We have 5 steps that we need to complete for managing MSAs and GMSAs. And the first thing we're going to do is open up a PowerShell window with administrative permissions, and then we're going to run this first command: add-kds rootkey-effective immediately. Now, when you type in effective immediately, most of the time that means we want this done ASAP. Please don't hold your breath while you're waiting for this key replication to take place because it could take up to 10 hours. The second command we're going to issue is the new -AD service account, and we're going to specify the service account name, the DNS host name, and the domain controllers involved with these MSA and GMSA accounts. We're then going to add the computer service account. We're using the add-AD computer service account, and we'll specify the domain controller for that. We'll then install the AD service account, and we'll use -identity and the service account we identified earlier in step 2. And then we need to log into Server Manager. We're going to locate our target servers through Tools and then Services. We'll locate the servers we want to assign the MSA or GMSA to. We'll choose the Logon tab. We'll add the GMSA, and then we're going to clear the password and confirm password checkboxes because remember, these handle passwords automatically. It's important for you to understand SPNs. SPNs are similar to DNS alias records or those CNAME records that we create, but instead of them pointing to a computer record in the DNS zone as the CNAME records do in DNS, these guys, the SPNs, point to domain accounts, which allows our domain controllers to use SPNs with Kerberos. And what they do is associate a service with a service logon account, which allows a client computer app to access a service using this service authentication process, not needing to know the account name. And in order for this service authentication to take place, we have to register an SPN in ADDS, and it requires 4 elements. The service class, www is the service class for a web server, and there are several well-known service classes out there that you could use, which is the SRV record, which is the service locator, or the MX record, which is the mail exchanger. We have the host component, which is the fully qualified domain name of the computer where that service is running, and then the port is used to identify where they'll locate that service. And you'll see we have an example of this command: set SPN-A, web service, identifying the service type, then the fully qualified domain name, the port number, and of course you'll have to supply the service name for authentication purposes. In some situations, you're going to want to configure a Kerberos constrained delegation, or KCD, not to be confused with KFC. This allows a front-end service to communicate with a back-end service, and it makes connections to servers on behalf of your clients. And it does so by using authentication delegation, which allows that service to act on behalf of another service. So we're kind of masking the service connection. In versions prior to Windows Server 2016, there was no way to prevent the delegation from extending to a third or even a fourth service. But now the KCD in Windows Server 2016 does prevent this. You'll need to use PowerShell to configure the KCD. We're going to create a variable called $computer. We're going to run the PowerShell command at get-ad computer and grab the identity of the server that's running the service. And then we're going to use the set-ad computer PowerShell command, specify the server with the switch principals allowed to delegate to account, humongous parameter, and we're going to supply the information that we've populated in the $computer variable in the previous command. So those are the two PowerShell commandlets that you'd use to configure that constrained delegation. These accounts that are used with SPNs and associating an account with a service are referred to as virtual accounts. You have to configure the service to use that virtual account, as we've talked about. They exist automatically and represent the local computer when being used to access apps or resources. To configure a service to use a virtual account, you're going to use these steps here through Server Manager. You're going to locate the server, Tools, then Services. You'll again locate the appropriate service that you want to configure, and then click the Logon tab. You'll add the virtual account, and again, because these passwords are updated automatically, you'll clear the password and confirm password checkboxes. And I've provided an example of an account that you would supply on this Logon tab. As you can see here, we have NT service, and then we have MTP-SRV1 $. And that would be an example of how I would configure a virtual account. Let's drop back out to our domain controller and take a look at the Managed Service Accounts container that's available in ADDS and how to modify a logon for one of our services. So here we are in Server Manager. We have two tools we're going to address here. We're going to go to Tools on the right-hand side, back to ADUC. And inside of ADUC, we are going to see on the left-hand side, we have this Managed Service Accounts. It's empty at this point because we haven't created any using those PowerShell commands. But even if we had created an account, it's not going to show up unless you have the advanced features turned on up here. So remember, go to View and then select Advanced Features to actually see these service accounts after you've created them. And the other piece I want to show you is the services. Again, to Tools and then down to Services this time. We'll scroll down and grab, let's grab the Kerberos Key Distribution Center. I'm going to right-click on that and go to Properties. And then here's that Logon tab I've been talking about. We'll click on the Logon tab. Notice how it's using the local system account. We'll switch it to the radio button that says this account, and we'll supply the GMSA account or MSA account associated with this service. And then we'll clear the password here, as well as clear the confirm password. Remember, we don't need these. And then we'd simply click Apply or OK, and that would configure this service to use this new account. We don't have a Managed Service Account set up, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel on this, but those are the steps necessary for doing so. So you now have an idea about the Managed Service Accounts and the Group Managed Service Accounts, or the MSA and GMSA, and the location for them. And we looked at the commandlets for managing the MSA and GMSA. There's 4 PowerShell commandlets, and then we use the Server Manager, as we just did, to specify the MSA or GMSA on a particular service. We looked at SPNs, which are used by Kerberos authentication protocols, and we talked about the 4 elements associated with an SPN, as well as taking a look at the command to create an SPN. And we talked about the KCD, the Kerberos constrained delegation, and we looked at the 2 PowerShell commands for configuring a KCD, and we wrapped it up by discussing how to apply a virtual account to a service.